It was an attempt to put Beijing in checkmate. That month, China was showcasing its newest and most advanced aircraft carrier, the Fujian, conducting highly publicized flight operations and catapult tests in the South China Sea. But lurking in Subic Bay in the Philippines was the USS Ohio, one of America's most powerful submarines. And when it surfaced at the same time as China's showcase event, it sent a clear message to anyone who is considering going up against the United States and its allies. No matter how impressive your surface fleet looks, it's what lurks beneath the waves that truly matters. And the USS Ohio matters a lot. So let's dive into what makes the USS Ohio so special, why its appearance caused such concern in Beijing, and how this move reflects the rocky situation in the Indo-Pacific. The USS Ohio is an Ohio-class guided missile submarine and among the first in that class to set sail. But despite being the oldest of the Ohio-class fleet, it is still one of the most formidable weapons platforms ever deployed by the United States Navy. Originally commissioned in 1981 as a ballistic missile submarine meant to carry nuclear weapons as a deterrent during the Cold War, the USS Ohio itself was transformed into a guided missile submarine between 2002 and 2006. This conversion was nothing short of extraordinary. The Navy removed the original 24 Trident ballistic missile tubes and replaced the majority of them with launchers that would fit up to 154 Tomahawk cruise missiles. That's more firepower than most countries' entire naval arsenals. Each Tomahawk missile has a range of roughly 1,000 miles and can strike targets with pinpoint accuracy, whether they're hardened bunkers, command centers, or naval installations. But the Ohio's capabilities don't stop at missiles. The submarine also serves as a loadout platform for the U.S. Special Operations Forces, particularly Navy SEALs. 2 of its missile tubes were converted into lockout chambers that can hold up to 66 Special Operations personnel and their equipment. This makes the Ohio not just a strike platform, but a multi-mission asset capable of covert operations deep in contested waters. What wasn't changed is how the submarine can stalk its targets in the open seas. The submarine's nuclear reactor allows it to remain submerged for months at a time, limited only by the need for new crew provisions and maintenance requirements. With a crew of about 155 sailors during traditional patrol missions, the Ohio can remain virtually undetectable when and for as long as it wants to be, which is why its public appearance was a showstopper. When a submarine like the USS Ohio surfaces in a foreign port, it's not because it has to, it's because it wants to be seen. And the message it wanted to send in September is that the Ohio's strike capabilities are in direct response to China's military posturing in the region. But what about China's aircraft carrier? How does it match up? The Fujian is the pinnacle of China's ambition to project power far beyond its shores. At approximately 80,000 tons displacement and roughly 1,036 feet in length, it's China's largest warship ever built, comparable to the size of the US aircraft carriers. Unlike China's previous designs, the Liaoning and Shandong, which use ski jump ramps to launch aircraft, the Fujian employs electromagnetic aircraft launch systems, or EMALS technology. The system essentially uses electric coils to create a magnetic field on the carriage of the aircraft. The magnetic fields are then layered so they get stronger in succession, each increasing the pulling on the hook. When unlatched, the plane is essentially catapulted into the air, with the EMALS configuration needing to be precisely timed to allow for smooth acceleration throughout the launch. EMALS allows the carrier to launch heavier aircraft, such as those with greater fuel and weapons loads. In turn, those heavier aircraft can carry weapons designed for longer strike ranges and have greater operational capabilities. As a result, their navy then has a much larger reach, so to speak. And in September, Fujian was testing the EMALS by successfully launching a stealth fighter and an early warning aircraft, while also publicizing the results. China's state media was practically celebrating. Videos showed the J-35 stealth fighter launching from the Fujian's deck, the electromagnetic catapult smoothly accelerating the fighter to flight speed. Meanwhile, the KJ-600 early warning aircraft, essentially China's answer to the E-2 Hawkeye, also launched successfully. The combination of aircraft gives the Fujian the capabilities of both surveillance and long-range strikes, at least in theory, given that its aircraft are only conducting field tests behind closed doors. For Beijing, these tests show that the decades of investing in technology specifically designed to go toe-to-toe and even counter American armed forces, particularly in the naval domain, were worth the effort. It wasn't by much, but China had just closed the naval gap with the US. The timing of these highly publicized drills is unlikely to be an accident. Russia is China's closest ally and remains currently embroiled in a war with Ukraine that it hasn't been able to escape for over 3.5 years. Meanwhile, the US has made significant strides with its own naval and air forces with the reveal of new bombers and stealth aircraft. And as the US gained military prestige through aiding Israel in its conflict in the Middle East, China was beginning to be designated as a silent power that only had economic and trading leverage due to its size and resources. Furthermore, China is more and more reliant on trade passing through the South China Sea and, more importantly, the Malacca Strait, which sees over 2/3 of China's maritime trade volume. The public showcase of the aircraft carrier likely served to bring a bit of spotlight back into the Indo-Pacific and hopefully force the US to back off from providing protection and defense procurements to Taiwan. The appearance of the USS Ohio in Philippine waters was therefore a stroke of genius on the part of the American Navy. Subic Bay, located on the island of Luzon, is approximately 500 miles from the areas where the Fujian was conducting operations. For a submarine like the Ohio, that's practically next door. In fact, the submarine could have been monitoring Chinese operations for weeks without anyone knowing, then surfacing at precisely the right moment to deliver maximum strategic impact. In addition, the sub's top speed is reportedly 20 to 25 knots, meaning that it can easily traverse those remaining 500 miles in a day if it had to, and its surveillance range is likely to be longer. The message the Ohio sent was devastating for Beijing's narrative. First, it demonstrated that US submarines can operate undetected in waters that China considers its sphere of influence. Despite China's investments in anti-submarine warfare capabilities, including sophisticated sonar arrays, patrol aircraft, and even AI technology, it couldn't detect the Ohio or deter it from entering the region. Second, the timing emphasized an uncomfortable truth for navies worldwide. While aircraft carriers are impressive symbols of power, they're also massive targets. The 154 Tomahawk missiles aboard the USS Ohio could theoretically be en route to the Fujian and its entire escort fleet before Chinese forces even knew the submarine was there. This isn't just theoretical posturing. Modern anti-ship missiles can overwhelm even the most sophisticated defenses, and a submarine's stealth gives it first-strike capability that surface vessels simply aren't able to match. Third, the Ohio's presence in Subic Bay reinforced the strength of the US alliances in the region. The Philippines, despite pressure from China and economic incentives from Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI, continues to allow US military access to its territory. The Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement between the US and the Philippines provides access to multiple bases across the archipelago, creating a network of positions that effectively surround China's claimed waters. In fact, the Philippines' exit from the BRI 2 years ago, citing changing geopolitics surrounding China, was no doubt one of the reasons behind China's aggressive posturing in the first place. This isn't the first time the US has deployed submarines to the Indo-Pacific as a show of force, and it certainly won't be the last. The USS Minnesota was reported to be patrolling the area in 2024, but Minnesota is a Virginia-class submarine, solely designed for attacking enemy ships or literal area denial. It's a sniper lurking in the dark. The Ohio was a showcase of an overhauled nuclear missile carrier that turned into a naval strike powerhouse. But more importantly, the Ohio arguably has less stealth capacities than the newer Minnesota, due to being a retrofitted older design. In truth, Minnesota was last marked to be stationed near Australia way back in late March 2025. But for all China knows, the sub could still be patrolling somewhere around the South China Sea or the Philippines. The fact that the USS Ohio was the one surfacing showed that China might not be able to detect any US submarines, or at least not deter them from showing up unannounced. Furthermore, the US still holds a significant advantage when it comes to stealth operations in the oceans. The US operates a fleet of 53 attack submarines and 14 ballistic missile submarines, the original Ohio class so to speak, with another 4 retrofitted guided missile submarines like the USS Ohio. These vessels can operate anywhere in the world's oceans with near impunity, gathering intelligence, conducting special operations, and maintaining strike capabilities that can reach hundreds of targets simultaneously. This creates a strategic problem for China that no amount of aircraft carriers can solve. To project power, China needs its surface fleet to operate far from its shores, but every one of those surface vessels is vulnerable to submarine attack, and China cannot guarantee it can detect US submarines before they're in position to strike. The USS Ohio incident also highlights a broader trend in Indo-Pacific military competition. China is investing heavily in visible displays of power: aircraft carriers, advanced fighters, and massive amphibious assault ships. These are impressive, photogenic, and make for great propaganda. The United States, meanwhile, continues to invest in capabilities that don't always make headlines but fundamentally shape the strategic environment. Submarine technology, long-range precision strike capabilities, distributed networks of bases and sensors, and space-based surveillance systems create a layered defense architecture that's far more effective than any single platform. Next, consider what the USS Ohio represents in practical terms. At any given moment, US submarines are dispersed throughout the Pacific Ocean, maintaining what the Navy calls persistent presence. They don't need to announce their locations because their value precisely lies in ambiguity. Potential enemies must assume that US submarines could be surveilling and at any time always ready to strike, which puts China constantly on the defensive. The Fujian's carrier group must maintain constant anti-submarine operations, deploying helicopters, escort vessels, and surveillance assets just to create a protective bubble around the carrier. This consumes more resources China doesn't have, requires significantly more investments, and ruins the image of the Fujian being the ultimate answer to America's naval superiority. Then there are those Tomahawks we mentioned earlier. The Ohio's ability to carry 154 Tomahawk missiles means it can threaten targets deep within Chinese territory. Coastal installations, airfields, command centers, missile batteries, radar sites – all of these become vulnerable the moment an Ohio-class submarine enters the region. China's area denial strategy, built around using long-range missiles to keep US carriers at bay, becomes far less effective when US submarines can approach Chinese shores undetected. Then there's also the fact that China is still incredibly behind the US in terms of sheer technology. The Fujian is China's first carrier with EMALS technology, yes, but even a year ago, we've seen multiple reports, which we've covered in a separate video, that it's nowhere near the Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier in terms of sheer power projection, robustness, and technical integrations. Furthermore, its operating fighters and support aircraft are still being refined and tested. The J-35 stealth fighter, while advanced, lacks the combat-proven track record of the F-35C that operates from US carriers and has been noted to need multiple engine and design changes to even be workable. The KJ-600 was only seen in sporadic tests, owing to the fact that it was completely incompatible with China's previous aircraft carriers. In contrast, US carrier operations represent decades of institutional knowledge, combat experience, and technological refinement. American carrier strike groups maintain sophisticated command and control networks that have been patrolling Allied waters for generations, having been present in every major conflict the world has seen in the past 30 years. Even in the Middle East, the US has used its aircraft carriers to create mobile forward bases and deny extremist groups the opportunity to take control of vital naval passages. Bottom line, the USS Ohio itself represents technology that China has yet to match. Beijing has publicized footage of nuclear ballistic submarines, including the famous 094-094A Jin nuclear model, which can carry both traditional anti-ship missiles and dedicated nuclear weapons, and is supposedly faster than the USS Ohio. However, since China doesn't seem to have tested the submarine far from the coast, it remains to be seen how stealthy they actually are and if they can avoid US surveillance systems. Additionally, most of China's attack submarines are diesel-electric, meaning they're much noisier and have greater refueling and restocking requirements than nuclear-powered subs. This puts the retrofitted Ohio in a class of its own, one that China might not know what to do about until it's too late. Beyond the direct US-China dynamic, the USS Ohio's appearance carries significant implications for Taiwan, as that small island is practically the main point of contention between the US and China that can have global implications. China has repeatedly stated its intention to reunify Taiwan with the mainland by force if necessary. The Fujian's carrier operations are likely partly designed to prepare for a potential Taiwan blockade or full-on invasion, providing air coverage and long-range reinforcements that would be essential in any amphibious operation against the island. However, any Chinese operation against Taiwan would require maintaining control of the seas around the island and protecting vulnerable transport and amphibious assault ships during the most dangerous phase of the operation. This is where US submarines become absolutely critical. A handful of Ohio-class and Virginia-class attack submarines could potentially devastate a Chinese amphibious fleet before it even reaches Taiwan. Each submarine could launch dozens of anti-ship missiles, creating a layered defense that would be extraordinarily difficult for China to overcome. Additionally, Taiwan's recent movements to improve its own coastal defenses provide it with a porcupine strategy that China might find too expensive to go through before any protracted conflict becomes dangerous for China's economy. Remember, just because China doesn't recognize Taiwan as independent, it doesn't mean it doesn't utilize the island's industrial prowess. Taiwan leads the world in advanced microchips and has repeatedly had to deny China the opportunity to source the newest models from the island. Still, China is a significant importer of Taiwan's chips, fueling the country's appliances and commercial technologies. In 2022, China accounted for over 40% of Taiwan's exports, mainly in electronics parts. While the trend reversed to the US being a major partner in 2025, China still profits from the island's proximity and booming microchip production. Which brings us full circle to China and the US continuously trying to one-up each other for control through military and economic power projection in the Indo-Pacific. As both nations continue their military modernization, the submarine domain represents one area where the US's advantages are likely to persist for the foreseeable future. The US is currently producing Virginia-class attack submarines at a rate of 1.2 boats per year, with plans to increase production further. These submarines incorporate the latest stealth technology, advanced sensors, and improved weapon systems. The Navy is also developing the Columbia-class ballistic missile submarines to replace the aging Ohio-class boomers, ensuring that the submarine deterrent remains credible for decades to come. The USS Ohio and its 3 retrofitted cousins will likely remain a core part of its broader strategy for a while longer. Meanwhile, China is playing submarine catch-up. While they are no doubt investing in submarine technology, it's going to take more than just building new vessels to match the US. It will require developing the industrial base, training the crews, establishing the maintenance infrastructure, and accumulating the operational experience that allows the submarines to be used effectively. These are all areas where the US has decades of advantage. Moreover, the geography of the Indo-Pacific favors US submarine operations. China's naval forces must pass through several strategic choke points to reach the open ocean, including the Miyako Strait, the Bashi Channel, and the Malacca Strait. Each of these can be monitored and, if necessary, controlled by US and allied submarines operating in conjunction with air and surface forces. To become a true global naval power, China needs to operate throughout the world's oceans. Yet to do that safely, it needs to accurately detect submarines. But despite various claims to have done so, China has provided no real way of knowing how close or behind they are in that regard. The September 2025 face-off between the USS Ohio and China's Fujian carrier group perfectly encapsulates the current state of Indo-Pacific naval competition. China is building an impressive surface fleet and making real technological strides. But the United States maintains a stranglehold on the domains that matter most: subsurface warfare, long-range precision strikes, and the ability to project power across vast distances without being detected. While China's carriers make for dramatic photographs and impressive propaganda, it's the submarines that no one sees that truly shape the strategic balance. The USS Ohio's appearance, even older models, are still practically undetectable to Allied and enemy capabilities, and that the US is not going to take aggressive posturing in the South China Sea lightly. As tensions continue to simmer in the Indo-Pacific and China continues to expand its military capabilities, the competition between superpowers intensifies. But like a chess match, sometimes the most significant moves are often the most subtle. Hundreds of feet below the surface, the Ohio-class submarines patrol undetected, ready to strike at a moment's notice. China can build all the aircraft carriers it wants, but until it solves the submarine problem, those carriers will always be vulnerable. Their crews always wondering if an American submarine is lurking beneath them, watching, waiting, and ready to remind Beijing that in the depths of the Pacific Ocean, the United States Navy still reigns supreme. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to know more about the Fujian and how it stacks up against American aircraft carriers, watch this video. And to stay up to date on geopolitics and new developments in military technology and capabilities worldwide, subscribe to The Military Show for daily videos.